Welcome, everybody, to another edition of All In with Art Stapleton, a New York Giants podcast brought to you by NorthJersey.com and The Record. I am your host, Art Stapleton. We are back. This is our final day here in Indianapolis at the Scouting Combine. Yes, it continues on the field for drills through the weekend, but our media interviews and today, and they saved the main event for this morning. And we'll go right into that. The first of two shows today. Make sure you catch them both. Today's show, Shedeur Sanders is at his podium. Listen to the Colorado quarterback. I've got some quarterback news in that mix. So we'll go Shedeur, and then we have Connor Rogers from NBC Sports. Talk about the draft a little bit. Talk about quarterbacks. Talk about free agency a little bit. Connor has background with the Jets. He does some Jets shows. We talked about DJ Reed a little bit, and I think he'll give you some flair there. And then we'll wrap up that show, and then with another show upcoming. So before we wait, why are we bothering to wait? Let's get right to Shedeur Sanders rolling up 9 a.m., 2 podiums away from Cam Ward. Here's Shedeur Sanders.
How's everybody doing?
Very good.
Shedeur.
Legendary.
Shedeur.
Yeah.
What has that relationship meant to you, and how fired up are you reunited in Las Vegas?
Yeah, Tom Brady, he's an all-time great. Being able to have that resource, being able to have that person I'm able to talk to and call whenever I'm having questions about the game, and he's able to relate to it because he did it at the highest level. It's truly amazing. I'm thankful for that.
Shedeur, have you just...
What's the origin of this? So what's the origin of your dad or something?
Well, far back, I'll say a couple years ago, he extended his hand. He was like, come work out with me in Tampa. So we flew down there. Dad came and we rode with him. He took me in his truck to this field, to his high school field. Then from then on, he was just telling me knowledge, and I filmed everything. I recorded everything. So now, even sometimes I go back and just listen to the things that he said at that time, and it registers. You know, everything that he said back then registers now, and it applies. So that's what I'm thankful for. Who my dad is, they hated on him too. So it's like, it's almost normal. Without people hating, it's not normal for us. So we like diversity. We like everything that comes with the name. That's why we are who we are.
Shedeur, you're surrounded by a ton of former NFL players and coaches at Colorado. Can you just talk about how their experiences kind of helped you move along and get ready for the next level, as well as adapting to the NFL playbook and lifestyle as well?
So I'm truly thankful. My dad was able to assemble a staff. He was able to assemble because there's knowledge everywhere. We're able to talk to the running back coach, receiver coaches, defensive coordinators, all these different types of coaches to give you their perspective and what you need to improve on and grow at. So I'm realistic. I know what I need to improve on. I know what I need to grow at. And year by year, cut on the tape, those mistakes cut down yearly. So nothing can faze me, no pressure, no situation. These cameras, nothing faze me. I grew up with it.
What do you think is most on your tape at Colorado? Your big arm and your decision making is exactly what stands out. What's something you wish you could have showed off more at Colorado?
That's a good question. I like that one. I wish we got in our groove, I say sometimes late in games. So that's how I realized, okay, going to the next level, I got to find myself early. I got to get ready mentally early because I know early on, some games I wasn't taking the completions coach was calling, Sometimes I was trying to make too much happen. So that just comes from a mindset of like do or die mentality to where you're going to succeed and not succeed. And sometimes, I got caught up playing hero ball, but I understand where I messed up, and now I'm going to fix it at the next level.
Shedeur, you mentioned being in front of the cameras for a long part of your life and adapting to that lifestyle.
Oh, there goes Sagan in the back. Everybody give it up for old Sagan. We right there. There we go.
What's it been like just being able to kind of adjust, and what's something that you don't necessarily see on your film, or just knowing you in general?
Excuse me, say that one more time.
Just like something that necessarily doesn't come on your film that's something that's really important to you that you've really grown with.
I say being a leader. That's my best trait overall. Because everything's mental. So if I play my game from the neck up, I got to be able to adjust to my players, to have them have related ability, for them to get to know me, for us to make everything smooth. So I came from an HBCU, then I went Power 5. Those two type of different players, and it's very diverse, and getting to know people, talk to people, and making everything genuine. So the path and everything I had, even with Dad being a coach, it's still been a challenge. It's still been everything, because he's my dad. So you can never want to come off a certain way to people. So that's why when I'm here interacting with people, I love interacting with people, because so they can truly get to know me and not just know clicks or anything like that. The plan, if that's not what you're trying to do, don't get me. If you ain't trying to change the franchise or the coaches, don't get me. So you should know history repeats itself over and over and over, and I've done it over and over and over. So it should be no question why an NFL franchise should pick me.
Shedeur, you think you're the top quarterback in this draft, and why?
Of course. Now the thing is, I respect a lot of quarterbacks here. They put a lot of hard work in to get to this point. So it's kudos to them. It's truly respect, but I know what I bring to the table.
And there is Shedeur Sanders in person for me for the first time. First time being face-to-face, albeit about 8 feet away. And I have to be honest, I'm impressed with how authentic he is. And I truly think it's authentic. You know, some guys come here and want to put on a show. I think this is just who Shedeur is. And look, when you grow up as one of the sons of perhaps the most flamboyant athlete of all time, and I don't think that's outrageous to say, in Deion Sanders, you're going to have a little flair to you. And, you know, I know there are some Giants fans who want to shy away from that. And I do also think that there are Giants fans who see Shedeur's game and don't see what I see, and don't see the ball placement and the accuracy and the poise in the pocket as something that you can build around, because today's NFL is all about the unicorn, the freak at quarterback. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, guys who have cannons for an arm, who will run over defenders, Lamar Jackson, whose speed just leaves defense in his dust. The reality is that that's not Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders' game is from the neck up. And it's not to say that he doesn't have any of those other qualities, but that's what jumps out for Shedeur Sanders when he meets with teams. When the Giants meet with him this week and they talk football, and Brian Dable gets Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward and other quarterbacks in that suite at Lucas Oil Stadium, the way we saw in Hard Knocks last year, they did with Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. That's when Shedeur Sanders' greatest quality comes to the forefront. And if it doesn't, and if he doesn't have that IQ and doesn't have that keen sense of football awareness, then he's not going to match Cam Ward and some of the other quarterbacks who have more physical gifts. But I think that is a very important point to all of this, is that just because someone might have better physical gifts doesn't mean that Shedeur Sanders is not a very good athlete. He's a good athlete. He's not Deion Sanders. He's not primetime. You know, he's not that kind of athlete. He's not Lamar Jackson in terms of athlete. He's maybe not even Cam Ward in terms of the ceiling of Cam Ward. But what I have to look at with Sanders, and I think this is important, going to year 4, I think back to the first year of Joe Shane and Brian Dable. Everything you heard outside of the building, and even some whispers inside the building, because I think they wanted to give some mixed messages out there, was that Kayvon Thibodeau would not play personality-wise with the Giants. And that just was not true. The Giants were engaged with his personality, and they had no problem with Kayvon's personality. Last year, here at the Combine, I can tell you, in back circles, people openly talked about how Malik Neighbors was difficult. He was going to be difficult when he got to a team, that he wasn't going to deal with losing well, and he was going to be a little, fight coaching a little bit. And the Giants were drawn to Malik Neighbors anyway. and they ended up drafting Malik Neighbors, and I'd say he worked out pretty well in year one. So I think it's important to kind of point all these things out, because when everyone is talking about Shedeur Sanders, and it's a lot. There's a lot that comes with Shedeur Sanders. But some of that is good. Some of that stuff is good. And like Shedeur Sanders said, if you don't want it, don't take me. And it's true. If the Giants don't want to deal with his personality, and they don't like his personality and don't think it's conducive to win it, then go in another direction. But I think that's kind of where they're at right now. Do I know? Are they leaning Shedeur more than Cam? One thing to remember before I get to our interview with Connor Rogers is that this is the first time the Giants were behind closed doors with Cam Ward. Joe Shane was at Miami on campus, at games, at Miami practice, just as he was with Shedeur Sanders in Colorado. The difference is that Cam Ward did not participate in any all-star activities once the college season ended. And at this point, this is the first time he's meeting with teams face-to-face with the head coach and everything else. So that's kind of where we're at as far as Cam Ward versus Shedeur Sanders, and that is going to continue. So without any further delay, let's get to our interview with NBC Sports Connor Rogers. All right, back here, radio/podcast row at the Combine. It's amazing what 10 years will do, the last 10 years, how this has morphed. But with me now, Connor Rogers, NBC Sports, draft guru, football guru. It's finally first time you and I are actually next to each other in person. But how the hell's your week been going?
It's crazy, man. I love it down here. There's so much happening. I mean, you get to talk to all the players. Now, obviously, all the people from the teams are here. It's one big sprint, but this is my favorite event of the NFL calendar.
So when you look at this year's draft class, obviously all of my focus is at the top, and you have obviously a big Jets flavor in some of the things you do, but you're also involved in a bunch of different things. When you talk about this draft, where do you go first? Where do you want to go first? Is it the quarterbacks? Is it the D-line? Where's your sweet spot?
I think for me, obviously, the strength of this group is definitely that defensive line. I like the depth of tight end. I like the depth of running back. I think the interior class is pretty strong when you start to talk about the tackles that are going to kick inside. But the conversation around the quarterback is obviously the most interesting, right? Because sometimes when there's not the supply there, that makes it more interesting. Like, what is this stare down right now? Are the Titans really not going to take Cam Ward first overall and just kind of roll into the year? Are they going to make a splash in free agency that we didn't see coming? And then is there going to be a trade-up scenario? I think Cleveland would be open for business, especially when you look at the Giants. There are 3 who need a quarterback right now. Does that change in the pro market as well? So the fact that Cam is the guy that the NFL has a consensus on as the number 1 quarterback, and then after that, it's mixed opinions. Like, obviously, Shedeur Sanders is probably going to go in the first round. Jackson Dart could sneak into the first round. But there's not all these guys that are last year 6 in the first 12 picks. And, we felt really good about a lot of those guys playing right away. We knew with the amount of college football Bo Nix and Michael Penix played that they could play right away if they needed to. Obviously, Caleb was going to play. The Patriots went to Drake a little earlier than we expected. So it's a very different year, and that leaves more mystery in this draft to me.
When you look at the Titans up top, and, that's my belief is that if the Giants can't work out this thing with Stafford, and we can talk about Stafford a little bit, but right now my gut feeling is that the Giants are going to go to a limit, but then if he leaves LA, it sure seems like the Raiders are making a strong push, maybe even a stronger push than the Giants, but we'll wait and see. I don't think the Giants could sit at 3 if they're intent on taking a quarterback. Even if it's going to be Shedeur, I just don't think, given their circumstances, what they've dealt with on the other side of town. I mean, what's happened. I just don't know if it's worth the risk to sit there and that Joe Shane and Brian Dable can walk into that draft room and be unsure of who is going to be their starting quarterback for this team in 2025.
I'm with you all the way, which kind of, to me, and you would know more about this than me, there should be urgency in the pro market. And obviously there is with Stafford. We're hearing everything about that. But even beyond Tim, is there a backup solution? But you look at just the draft, these guys got to get someone. They got to sell a plan. They got to show that they can win. And that's why, for me, if it's the Giants, it's got to be Cam Ward. And if it's got to be Cam Ward, you got to find a way to go up and get him. And why I say that is, multiple years at Incarnate Ward as a starter. He was the best player at that level. He transfers up to Washington State. where he's another multi-year starter. And he's gotten better over that time. And then the 5th year at Miami, where the turnover-worthy play percentage is going downward. That's a good sign for a little bit of his recklessness. Good body type, dense body, big arm, mobile enough that he creates. He scrambles. He can change arm angles. He's very tough. Everybody that's been around Cam Ward, they follow him. I had Elijah Arroyo, the Miami tight end, today at our set. And I was asking him about it. I was like, what did you know with Cam? And he's like, spring ball. He's like, we got there, and I knew he was different right away. Like, it was instantly the confidence, the way he leads them. He passes the test of a guy that's played a lot of college ball. He's won a lot of college ball, and he has the physical ability and traits that you want. That if the Giants can't get a guy that's in the pro market that's ready to win now, I think Cam Ward is ready to win now, and I would make the play to go get him.
You know, it's interesting because, you know, kind of talked about this with Joe Shane earlier in the week, the idea that, you know, the two top quarterbacks on everybody's board, everybody outside of the teams, right?
Yeah.
We assume we know what the consensus is, but who knows? You know,
Right.
all it takes is the Giants to look at it and go, we have Shedeur at the top of our board, and,
Right, yeah.
and that's the difference. But what's interesting is the dynamic between Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. We've seen them together on video. They've trained out together a little bit. They seem to have a nice, you know, budding rivalry,
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
will.
it's fun.
You know, maybe it's a Peyton Brady thing, not the play, but the personalities
Sure.
involved. What's interesting is that Shedeur's been out front. I don't even know necessarily if it's because of who his father is or
Right.
where he's played, but he seems just comfortable in that. He's courtside at basketball games in
Right.
Denver. He's at the Shrine Bowl, you know, which I think was interesting because he's not participating. They kind of broke the rules a little bit, the way they were supposed to be intended, but he was out there. He's talking to teams. This is the first time Cam has actually met behind the scenes with these teams.
Right.
And for me, it's very interesting because I lean towards Shedeur solely because probably, and I'm admitting this, I've had more exposure to
That's fair.
Shedeur outside
Yeah.
of the football.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see a lot these next couple of weeks, the idea of when, you know, Cam actually sits down with a team
Yeah.
and gets grilled. You know, all the negatives from Hard Knocks last year, the one positive for the Giants was seeing Dable break down film with the quarterbacks. You know, I wonder what's going to happen when he sits down with Cam and Shedeur, and then to a lesser extent, just based on expectations, Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe and, you know, Tyler Shock, whoever
Right.
else they want to bring in. What do you think about that whole idea of Cam? Because right now it's almost like all you have is the tape, which
Right.
is great.
Right.
I mean, that's really how we should be picking these players. But with the quarterback, especially in New York, there's more to it.
There's so much more to it. Character with quarterbacks. This is the face of your franchise. This is the guy that after every loss is on the podium getting peppered with questions and having to explain what went wrong and what they need to do better. And he's the guy that needs to get in the – and guys know in the huddle. Like they all tell me. They know. When we get into the huddle, we know if a guy has it or not, and we can follow him if we believe we can win. I think with Cam, number one, I think that'll be a positive selling point with him in front of teams. And you're right. He hasn't had that exposure because didn't go through the All-Star process, which was a little bit of a surprise. I know both the Shrine and Senior Bowl games wanted him. And, you know, he opted to not participate in that process, which is fine. That's his choosing. He's put out a lot of tape at college ball, so it's not like he needed to play more. But the exposure is a big element of it. I think teams will really like his intense demeanor. He is a guy that's very confident. Him and Shedeur are very different. I think Shedeur is very comfortable and a little bit more laid back. I think Cam is a very intense competitor. And I think some of that, to be fair, and I know Shedeur started at Jackson State, but he was a 4-star recruit. Cam was a 0-star recruit. Cam was not a real football quarterback recruit. And he goes to Incarnate Ward and has to show I'm the best player at this level. Okay, now I get a shot, you know, obviously with a bigger program. And now I get another shot with an even bigger program at Miami. And he just checked the boxes along. Like adversity was never a thing for Cam Ward. And, you know, to be fair to Shedeur, he's done a lot of positive things in that way as well. A lot of people looked at him and said, like, okay, is he a real quarterback prospect? Probably with assumptions with his dad. And he has played his way into being a top quarterback prospect. So I think that is such a key part. And the thing people overlook is it's not just the teams meeting here with them in general. Coaches want to know the DNA of a quarterback and what they're dealing with and what they can develop. If they see eye to eye with the guy, does he have what it takes to take coaching and develop? And that's huge with the quarterback spot. So everything you hear leading up to this, you take with a little bit of a grain of salt because these guys haven't made decisions yet.
The coaches haven't been involved. And that's the other
key.
part of this aspect is that, you know, we saw last year, again, I go back to Hard Knocks because no one's ever going to do it again, or at least for a long
I
time.
don't think so.
Because of the way things were exposed for the Giants, both positive and negatively. I mean, we know everything that could have gone against the Giants went against them. All the decisions that they made,
Right.
whether they were made soundly or not, from the outside, the idea is they all went against them. But that was the other thing that, came from the combine, is that most coaches have not even started breaking down tape
No
until
time.
3 weeks ago. And
Right.
if that, it may get to the combine. Okay, this is how I want to do it. And Dable was one of those guys where I want to break down the tape the morning and the afternoon of the day that I'm going to see those quarterbacks
Right.
in that suite. I want it to be fresh in my mind. I want to be able to talk to them about what they're going to do. So as you said, it's one thing to have the Southeast scout say, this is the guy.
Right.
It's another thing to say, the player personnel guys love him, or the GM is impressed because he was at practice. Giants were at practices for Cam Ward. We didn't know that, at least publicly, because there was no video guy walking around videoing him.
Yeah.
We knew that at Colorado because we saw the video. So now it's interesting and how that plays out. I wanted to ask you this just because your Jets background and the stuff you do with the Jets. It's so much. It's really funny to me that there's so much. It's all about the quarterback with the Giants.
Yeah.
And yet the Jets kind of have as big of a decision to make with the cornerback.
Huge.
Is there any sense that you have that maybe the Jets are kind of lying back here saying, you know what, how's this thing going to break out? And, I know I've seen a couple of mock stuff, but I think that's just Hail Mary. I mean,
Right.
Is there a legit reason to think as closer we get to the draft, could the Jets be kind of laying in the weeds saying, you know what, if one of these picks is going to be available and the Giants don't want to budge because
Right.
they get too comfortable at number 3, could they be in that kind of market?
I would never rule it out. What if they come to this place and fall in love with Cam Ward, the person, and then they start putting the puzzle pieces together, and then you start figuring out the price because they're at 7 and the Giants are at 3. You start to figure out the price, and the Jets have a lot of needs where they're going to need their draft capital. Can you figure out where we love the player and we're willing to go up and get the player? But I think on the flip side is, and I'm not telling you they're going to start Tyrod Taylor the entire season.
Yeah, no.
They like him a lot. They owe him his money. I think they'll go into the pro market, get another quarterback, whether it's Justin Fields, whoever it may be. So they have 2 veterans. And then maybe you take a flyer on a guy in the middle of the rounds that could sit behind them and develop. And then you kind of have the openness the following years that maybe you do make that big play for a quarterback because it's a new regime.
Yeah.
There's less urgency. They know that Aaron Glenn came here and made it clear, like, I want to win. I'm not here to rebuild and do. But there's different ways you could do that. Where the Giants, I think it's about selling that plan of this is our guy. I'm developing him. He's going to be the guy under center that leads us to a bright future that's sustainable. So I think the urgency is different. Where the Jets, it would have to be advantageous in terms of value. Where the Giants, it's like, we better figure this out, and we better figure it out now.
It's funny. It's the evaluation versus the valuation of
Yes.
the players and just the idea. That's why, again, I said in the beginning, I do think that if the Giants are going to draft a quarterback, it is worth it to get up to number 1 if they can, because if you sit back and you sit there and you think, man, I'm going to get one of those quarterbacks because Tennessee's going to take Abdul Carter. Now, all of a sudden, the guy you may want might not be there at 3 because that's just the way things are going to work.
I think it happened to the Raiders a little bit last year, which is funny to look at now because they got Brock Bowers. And Brock Bowers is an amazing talent. There's nothing wrong with how that outcome ended up. But I think they sat there and were like, one of the guys in the back end we like at 6 going to the top 12. The Broncos did a really good job lying in the weeds. The Falcons did a really good job lying in the weeds. I think more teams liked Michael Penix than the general public realized. But
Agreed.
so that was a big talking point as well. But you're right. I know people get sick of this because it's such a cliche. But if you think a guy's the guy, you do whatever it takes to get him because nothing else matters. Like once you have the quarterback, you could do the rest of the building blocks under that. If you don't have the quarterback, it feels like such a random kind of, fish in a barrel situation where, okay, we have this strength of the roster, but we're weak under center and we have to overcompensate in so many different ways.
I had Mike Garafolo from NFL Network on yesterday's show, and just the idea, we kind of touched on that. Joe Shane made a comment on Monday, Tuesday, just the idea of, sometimes you get guys in the building and you love their tape, and then you watch them walk around the building and you go, that guy's not going to make it in this area,
Right.
And we both said we kind of felt that may have been J.J. McCarthy, the idea of, they like the player, but they didn't know if he would survive New York. Now, look, I'm not trying to make it out to be big bad New York. You know the deal, but
Darnold got chewed up here.
Yeah, some guys are better off being in other markets. I could tell you this, and it would not surprise me, and I haven't heard this from anybody in the building, but I almost get the sense that the Giants liked Penix a lot last year, and maybe even Bo Nix, but they had a spot where they had Neighbors ahead of them, and the quarterback tax didn't leapfrog Neighbors. So they took Neighbors, and they said, you know what? If we've got to pay, we're going to pay to get back up into the first round to get quarterback, and they probably thought Penix would be available
That's what I heard.
late in the teens, and then all of a sudden he goes, and whatever plan that you may have thought you had all of a sudden blows up in your face, and that to me leads back to this year. They are not going to leave it to chance and say, well, we'll wait at 3 and we'll get whoever we want, because you just don't know how that's going to happen.
You don't, and what we heard, what I heard aligns exactly with what you heard. I heard early in the process, the Giants were very out in front of it, that they were kind of phoning around thinking, we like Michael Penix a lot. Is he going to go in the top of the second round where we're positioned? And then as the draft went on, everybody started watching him, and it's like, hey, you probably have to trade it into the end of round 1 to get him, which I think they were comfortable with, like you said. And then all of a sudden, his stock took off like a rocket ship, where you looked at it and everybody was like, I think Penix is going to sneak into the top 12 to 13 picks. The Raiders was maybe the floor. Then the Falcons blindsided everybody. Everybody.
I remember on draft night, right? That popped up, and that doesn't happen
Not in that capacity.
anymore.
Not in that capacity where you're just that shocked, especially because they signed Kirk Cousins, so people kind of overlooked it. And the Giants got a great player in Malik Neighbors. And the beauty of that is now this young quarterback, or whatever quarterback goes into their offense, goes in with a legit number 1 piece. But you're right. It was obviously a trying year where it's like, okay, we wish we had somebody else under center and more to develop and everything like that.
Because they would have flipped to Penix, quite honestly, if they had
Real
him.
quick.
They would have flipped him probably week 3 after the Washington game. They probably would have gone to the rookie, and that they didn't have a rookie. They weren't going to go to Drew Lock, and they couldn't go to DeVito that early, so they were just kind of down that road.
And then everybody's bought in and excited to watch Penix play. And you know how it goes.
I wanted to ask you, since I said, you do the stuff with the Jets, there are some Jets ties now for the Giants. Now, obviously, Marquand Manuel comes over and coaching, but when he came over and the Giants were looking at free agency, I want to tap into a little DJ Reed with you, because for me, I don't think the Giants, unless they're deciding, Travis Hunter's our guy, and we're going to take Travis Hunter, and we're going to worry about quarterback, whether it's in free agency or later in the draft. I think DJ Reed should be the top guy that they look at in free agency, especially now that the Chiefs have said they're going to tag Trey Smith. That's another spot that I thought the Giants, if they're going to splurge at right guard or splurge at corner. Tell me a little bit about DJ Reed, and does his value go beyond being the guy who's playing opposite Sauce? Because that's always a concern.
No, you got to realize when he signed with the Jets that he got a rookie version of Sauce Gardner. And DJ Reed, interesting player because he's 5'9", but he plays outside, and he plays really well. He's somebody that has really good vertical leap ability to still play at the catch point. He's sticky in coverage. He was very physical coming downhill as a tackler, considering his size. And he's somebody that's gotten better year after year for the most part. I feel like he was pretty banged up this year, which led to some lower moments than we were accustomed to seeing. But he's going to go out there and be signed as a team's low-end number 1 corner. And for the Giants, that's after you had a pretty good draft in that area last year, it's an area you'd like to supplement with a starter like Reed, because I like this corner class. But if I'm the Giants, I'd rather be able to spend where I can, and DJ Reed's an area where you can, and then attack the needs that I can't buy in the draft with the premium picks, like I believe they're pick 34 and 65, which you can get really good players in this draft.
I'm looking interior defensive tackle. I want to talk to you about that too, because I think both New York teams are looking for a guy to supplement the guy that they have. You're talking about
next to those guys.
Yeah, you're talking about Dex and Quinnen are both at the top of the market financially, and in New York. I mean, just 2 years ago, the debate was Dexter or Quinnen or Dexter, who's there. And now there's this idea. So let's pivot to that in this draft back again. The interior defensive tackles. I mean, Mason Graham's off the board. Who knows what's going to happen with Grant with Michigan? I guess he's a little banged up. They found some things this week.
He'll probably be a first round.
In medicals. So if the Giants are sitting there at 34, I asked a couple guys earlier this week. I had the TJ Sanders in my mock draft, but he was available in the 3rd round. Who do you like? Who are some of your guys, do you think, interior defensive line that you've been zeroing in on that day 2, early day 2?
Yeah, I think the beauty of it is you can go a different route with that pick at 34, and you can get a starter at 65. Like I'm looking at Shamar Turner from Texas A&M, who everybody knows about that defensive line. You had Nick Scorton. You had Shamar Stewart, who's going to be a top 15 pick. Turner is the third guy and gets so overlooked because of that. He's big. He's tough. He'll play a really rugged brand of football. He'll take on blockers with physicality and really strong hands, good athlete, length. That's a guy I think you can get at 65. Maybe Alfred Collins from Texas, who has played all up and down the line of scrimmage for Texas. He plays true nose tackle, shade nose, 3-tech. He's a excellent run defender. The pass rush has really not come on as the way people thought it would, but he's built really well. I know he just measured in long arms, really big mass. That's a starting run defender for me in Alfred Collins. If you want a little bit deeper of a value, Jamari Caldwell from Oregon. Like everybody talks about Derek Harmon, who could be a pick at 34, a big hulking nose tackle that really their pass rush went nuclear for him this year at his size, which is impressive. But if you want more value, Caldwell played nose tackle for them. Another guy with good feet. He's got great size. He's 340 pounds. He looked great at the Senior Bowl, getting off the ball. He can hold the point of attack. There's so much depth in this class that if I can get a starter at 65 and then attack a position that's a little thinner in the top of the second round, that's how to play the board.
So what would you do then at 34? I mean, you know the Giants a little bit. I know you didn't dig in on their depth chart. What would you do at 34 then? If you, let's say they sign DJ Reed.
Right.
So you have DJ Reed, Deontay Banks, Drew Phillips, and then Cordell Flott is their fourth guy. What would you do in that spot?
I'd be looking at both right tackle and wide receiver, I think, for me. I'd be looking at, or any of these offensive linemen that can really play
Kick
all.
inside.
Yeah, guys that have that versatility, because the Giants have the injuries. It's hard to keep up who they're playing where, especially with Andrew Thomas's health over the years, but you're locking him in at left tackle. But a lot of these guys on the interior, I mean, there's a lot of different talents. I'm curious to see what Josh Connerly from Oregon does, who's a true left tackle. I think he has the athleticism to play both sides. Obviously, Gray Zabel would be a really interesting
His
pick.
name has been all over the place.
Monster Senior Bowl week. North Dakota State played left tackle, played right tackle. Goes to the Senior Bowl. They kick him inside. I think he'd be a great center. I think he'd be a great guard. Nobody can get by him at the Senior Bowl. That was the key for me.
Is he a guy, because of the Senior Bowl that he had, is going to be that
Right in
late
that spot.
first round, early
I'd say top of day
round?
two. Top of day 2 for Gray Zabel, and can really be a plus starter for you on the interior offensive line. If you want to get a different wide receiver from Malik, you look at Jaden Higgins from Iowa State, big-bodied wide receiver, a Jack Besh from TCU, maybe Matthew Golden from Texas, who's a little different. He's more a refined route runner, not as explosive, but refined. Maybe he's there at 35 as well. So I think those offensive needs would kind of trump the value that I can get on the defensive line later.
I'm telling you what I'm doing in free agency. If I'm Dable and they have a great relationship, I know he had an ACL and he's coming off an ACL. I'm going for a 1-year prove-it deal with Stephon Diggs.
One less need.
I would go Stephon Diggs. I'd say come in. He loves Dable. Dable loves him. Play with Malik. You're going to get single coverage because they're all going to shade towards Malik now. Final thing, and this has been great. I really appreciate it. First, Monday rolls around. Combine's over. We're looking at free agency, but we're still talking draft. Who's the one guy or one or two guys that we really haven't shown a light on that you think, you know what, these are my guys. Like, these are the guys that you guys need to pay attention to over these last 4 weeks.
I'll give you a deeper cut on defense. It's Jacob Parrish, corner from Kansas State. He's about 5'9", high school sprinting champion. He's got some of the best cover skills in the entire draft. I mean, he really, really does. He's not going to go in those first 2, maybe not first 3 rounds. We'll see. He'll be 20 years old on draft night. He was so sticky in coverage, really, really talented player in that regard. And then I'll give you a safety on the back end, too, that is getting no buzz. And I thought over summer when I watched him, maybe a first-round pick, tears his ACL 3 games into the season. That's Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State. Big, physical, tough safety, really intense guy. Talked about, just the battles him and Tyler Warren have had in practice, how much better they made each other. He's got a sixth sense around the line of scrimmage. He can play in the box. He can play the post. He can really play anywhere you want. And he's built well. His dad was a defensive end for James Madison. So, I mean, you can see the bloodlines with that. Winston is a guy, he can't work out here, so he won't get that attention. But now that he's here in front of teams, when teams meet with him, they'll be like, oh, you would have been a first rounder if you were healthy all year. Now we're going to get a discount on you on day 2. He'll be a starter for a long time.
That's interesting. So he's here with the medicals. I mean, do you think it's one of those things where when Giants and Jets pro days roll around, that the local stuff that they can come. I know Giants.
Yeah.
I think Jets can too, right? The pro day doesn't count for Penn State local.
It,
So
it should not,
they
right?
might be able to come in and say that's an interesting name.
Yeah.
All right, before we wrap up, where can everybody find you this weekend?
This is the weekend. NBC Sports, the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. We have an interview with almost every prospect. We split it up. I get to do a couple. Nicole Auerbach does. I say a couple. I mean 40 of them.
Yeah.
Sims and Florio doing at least 40 of them as well. So if you want to learn about these prospects, the NFL on NBC YouTube channel, we have one-on-ones with just about all of them.
You gotta really spend time with Sims.
It's tough. I spent a lot of time with Sims. A lot of time.
I covered Chris in high school at Ramapo. I covered Matt
That's
in
amazing.
high school at Don Bosco. So both of them, and now I'm working side by
And
side.
you see
with
him all the
Well,
time
not
over
side
here.
by side. He's big time.
Yeah, but
Only get him sometimes.
he spends time with the little people like me. That's for
And
sure.
same here. That's Connor Rogers. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate it. All right, thanks to Connor Rogers, and obviously you can get all of his stuff everywhere that he said. Just a great follow, and we've got that last day feel here for the media here at Radio Row. Even though they have media interviews tomorrow with the offensive linemen, it's kind of funny how we've got a buddy over here. As we're ending the show, as I told you, it's a little fun this week. We've got Blue, the Colts mascot, is dancing around here. So we're going to see if we can get him on over here and see if we can get him on and come on. And he's beating up Jake Asman of ESPN right now. So not to the level of Jordan Schultz and Ian Rappaport at Starbucks in the JW the other night. But I think we're going to get Blue the mascot over here and see if... Nah, he's going the other way. Oh, well. I guess he didn't want to be old. Anyway, that's our show. Appreciate everyone tuning in. Again, make sure you check out all of the episodes from this week. And appreciate all the guests that are around. Thanks to producer Paul Wood, who's put in yeoman's work this week, getting everything done, everything produced. And make sure you check out all of our covers on NorthJersey.com.